On this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech, Microsoft gets a facelift, we're talking power over Ethernet, and CRM. TWiT on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for the following show is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, recorded August 27th, 2012, Episode 7, Beer Power over Ethernet. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show dedicated to the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how the world is connected. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, your guide to all things in the enterprise. And I'm joined, as always, by a wonderful panel, starting on my right with Mr. Lou Maresca from Microsoft. Lou, thank you for coming on. The first time I've ever met you. And why don't you describe a little bit about what you do at Microsoft?
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's amazing being here, actually. I've been with Microsoft for about 9 years, just as a developer on enterprise research planning products like Dynamics GP. I've also been on the CRM team, which is what I'm on right now, doing work for them on their product Outlook client type work, as well as web-based, cloud-based work.
Okay, Lou. Well, and also, if you've been part of our chat room, you know Lou MM because he's in there more than I am, which is kind of scary because I kind of live in there. But no, that's not all. That's not all. If you look over to my left, you'll see first a familiar face, Mrs. Mary Jo Foley. Oh my goodness, the queen of Microsoft herself. How is allaboutmicrosoft.com?
It's doing well, thank you.
And
even in this lull, the summer lull, which is not much of a lull lately, we've had a lot of Microsoft news.
Yes, indeed. And even if it's inadvertent Microsoft news, because we've had a lot of movement in the tech industry, and it definitely affects Microsoft. We'll get into that a little bit later. But first, I want to introduce a face that should be familiar to you by now, Mr. Brian Chee. He is the evangelist for ThingLinks. He's also the geek in paradise in Honolulu. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's a rainy day in Honolulu, but it's still warm rain.
Warm rain's good. And, you know, you're in Hawaii, so you can't really complain. We can. But first, before we complain, there is a little story that I figured since we have two Microsoft experts on the show, we should ask about. And that is Microsoft changing its logo. Now, okay, wait. Stop. I know a lot of people are going, oh, great, why are we talking about this? But this is important, right? This is branding. A brand is how a company identifies itself. And Microsoft has changed its brand over the years whenever they think there's a new chapter of the company about to be written. So this signifies that Microsoft believes they're about to turn the page on something exciting. Lou, let's start with you. Without giving up enough information to make HR call you in for an angry meeting, what's going on?
So, I mean, the basic thought behind it, there's multiple pools of thought that people have around it, obviously, but the main thought is to kind of bring it back to the roots and to really show that the product has the company really has multiple products that it has to represent. And just like Windows 8, kind of bringing it back to that tile-based infrastructure, they're also trying to bring it back to the way Microsoft used to be. And, kind of narrowing in on specific things that they need to do to get things done to help their customers. So that's kind of what they're trying to do, is really help that out.
Now, again, without getting you into trouble, I like something that you said, getting back to basics, getting back to how it used to be. That's always sort of a rallying cry whenever you have a company that maybe some people have are starting to think has lost its way. Sure. Microsoft is sort of, well, let's say, surrounding the camp and trying to rediscover what it does best. Mm-hmm. Mary Jo Foley, what's your take on this? Because, I mean, you cover Microsoft extensively. What is this new chapter you think the company is about to start?
Well, Microsoft's basically going to rev almost every product, if not every product, in its entire lineup, from consumer to enterprise, everything, in the next 12 plus months. So this is just kind of like the precursor saying, hey, get ready. We have a whole bunch of launches coming up. We have Windows 8 coming. We have the Surface and Office 2013 and You name it, we've got it. Xbox, new Xbox dashboard, then the new Xbox console. So I think this is just kind of setting the stage, saying, get ready. Here comes a whole lot of stuff from us.
Brian, I want to use a slightly different angle for you, and that is both of us are involved with another company, HP, that has also recently redone its branding. And that was a little strange because they went from a sort of a 3D look to more of a flat blue look. I don't want to show it because I'll actually get in trouble with HP. But, you know, they did that because they want to sort of separate themselves from the HP of the past. With their new CEO, they want to say, this is not your father's HP. Do you think Microsoft is saying that? Or is this just really sort of a hopeful note of, hey, we've got a bunch of stuff launching. Consider us as a new Microsoft?
I don't know. You know, Microsoft has certainly been changing over the years. They've certainly gotten a lot easier to work with, and I've certainly enjoyed the teams and the way the PR people are letting them do more things. Just the fact that their blogs have been very, very open. That's definitely not the Microsoft I remember of 10 years ago.
Right.
You know, I could speculate that, you know, simpler logos in general are great for branding on a lot of online stuff. You know, nice little recognizable logos, even if it's teeny tiny. Maybe it's a change in the way the market's going.
Now, Mary Jo, I do want to throw a question to you that I just saw in the chat room from WB Height, who said Microsoft's biggest branding problem is that there's so much variation between their products. Bringing them all together, even if nothing more than branding and looks, is good for them. I mean, would you agree with that? Would you say that there's been some confusion in Microsoft's branding strategy, marketing strategy, and that this is sort of a recognition of that and maybe a promise to make amends, to make it simpler to buy Microsoft?
Yes, definitely. That's a great way of putting it, actually. The problem right now that they're having around this whole branding thing, though, is we can't use the word metro anymore. I think you guys probably have talked about that on the show. So, you know, what we would have said maybe a month ago is they were metrifying everything, putting the Metro stamp on the logo and on the UI for all the different products, you know, Windows Phone 8, Windows 8, Xbox. But now we can't say Metro, and we don't know what we're supposed to say in its place because Microsoft hasn't given us another word. So I think that's adding a bit to the confusion around this branding. But the overall idea and the back thinking is, let's make it more simple. Let's make everything look more alike. Let's have one developer platform. Let's have things, even whether they're consumer or enterprise, have a similar look and feel and licensing model. So I think they really are trying to clean that story up.
All right. Jason is scrolling through the different Microsoft logos through the years right now, and I remember that first logo because it had that sort of optical illusion. When I would buy games or software packages that had that, it would almost feel like a lenticular where it would change views depending on how you're holding the box. I want to give the last word on this story over to Lou. Lou, when you look at these logos, when you look at how they've changed over the years, what does the new logo evoke? What kind of feelings, or I mean, you work for them. Are you filled with hope, or are you just looking at this going, oh, great, another weird change?
You know, I think it feels more synergistic. I mean, it feels like we kind of, like somebody said in the chat room, you know, each product kind of has its own meaning. I mean, this, like you said, is basically brings those products back together. And it makes me feel like, you know, we work with the Office team on the CRM team, and it makes us feel like we continue to kind of synergize all the products together, and all of us kind of mean something. So it does feel better. It does feel, I mean, like you saw, the original ones were monochromatic. Now we kind of get a little color in there. So it's kind of nice, actually.
So you've heard it from here. You've heard it from a Microsoft employee, from a Microsoft expert, and from a Microsoft user. We kind of like the logo. Now, we voted on what video segment we were going to use for this show. We had VLANs and we had PoE, and it did come down to the wire. In fact, including the emails and the Google Plus messages and the Twitter messages, it was 57 votes for VLANs, 58 votes for PoE. So we're going to show you a new episode of Stuff My IT Guy Says, including Power over Ethernet. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the Digital Jesuit, host of TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech on the TWiT network. It's time for another edition of Stuff My IT Guy Says. I'm here at the Interop Warehouse in Brisbane, California, and this time I've brought a guest. I'm sitting next to Mr. Peter Chen, a technical marketing engineer from Netgear. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you're going to help us go through all this stuff because all this gear in front of me is PoE enabled. So tell me, Peter, what is PoE?
PoE stands for Power over Ethernet, which literally is what it says it is. It provides power to devices that need it through your standard Ethernet cable.
Okay, now I would imagine that would add cost and complexity. I have to replace switches or add power injectors. Why would I want to go through all that trouble when, well, honestly, things kind of work well as they do now?
Take this IP camera, for example. In the past, if you had to get it to work, you would need two cables. One, Ethernet cable for your data, and you'd also need a power cable plus power adapter for the power. Now, this is all fine and dandy until you need to hook this up to the ceiling where there's no power socket to be found.
So it's really about ease of deployment. If I have a tough installation, it allows me to run a single cable rather than running multiple cables. Now, that works for IP cameras, but it also works for something like this, which is an access point, which means that instead of running a cable for console, a cable for data, and a cable for power, I can run one cable and reduce my expenditure for deployment.
Oh, yeah.
It also means that I can use devices like this. IP phones are almost all PoE now, so I can run this phone off of one cable, which provides both its connectivity and its power. All right, now, tell me how it works. I understand that PoE sends out 48 volts, but obviously it doesn't do it all the time because then I'd have live wires all over my network, and that could be problematic.
Yeah, that could potentially burn down the office, so we don't want that.
Yeah, okay, no.
And that's where the 802.3 AF PoE and 802.3 AT PoE Plus standards come in.
Okay.
It sort of regulates who gets how much power.
Right. Now, with those standards, there's a handshake. So essentially, let's say this camera. I plug this camera into this network, and what's going to happen is the switch will recognize it has a new device plugged in. It's going to send a short burst of power over to the camera and say, hey, do you support PoE? The camera will then say, yes, I support PoE. And the switch will say, okay, what kind of PoE do you want? And the camera will say, oh, I need AF or I need AT. And then the switch sends the appropriate amount.
Exactly.
Okay, now, tell me, what are the differences between classes of PoE? We've got AF, AT, I believe there's a couple of other intermediary steps, right?
Yeah, so the original AF standard supplied roughly up to 15 watts of power per port. As you can imagine, 15 watts is not a lot, and devices that are a little more power hungry could not be powered with that. So that's where the whole 802.3 AT standard comes in. It basically doubles the amount of power that can be supplied by a single PoE port.
Right. So, for example, this camera, that camera, this phone could be powered off of 15 watts, but this array definitely couldn't.
Definitely not.
Okay. Now, where do we see this going? Because obviously, we're not going to keep increasing the amount of voltage that we send over PoE, but we are seeing PoE included in pretty much every piece of enterprise gear. When do we start to see this will trickle down into the consumer side? I mean, we've already got it in a few cameras, but when does everything start to be powered over the same cable that it gets its data from?
Well, actually, in the past couple of years, if you watch TV at all, you'll see a lot of home surveillance packages being offered by maybe your local cable provider. With that, I imagine that there's going to be a ton of surveillance cameras being installed to more and more homes all over the world. And naturally, PoE would be the obvious choice for flexible deployment.
Okay. So there you have it. That's what PoE is. That's what it does. That's how it works. Now, you need to pick up some of these devices just to try it out for yourself. Personally, I always carry around this Netgear ProSafe PoE switch so that I have the ability to power my phone and my cameras when I'm on the go. It might be the thing for your network. I'm Father Robert Ballecer. This is Stuff My IT Guy Says, and you've just been learning. I still remember the very first time I used a PoE device. It was the coolest thing ever. I believe it was for a PoE camera. It was an Access IP camera, and I plugged in the data cable. I did not know it was PoE, so I was actually reaching for the power cable, and I looked back at the camera, and I realized it was on, and I was like, wait, what? And it's just a really, really good technology. Cheebert, you have it deployed extensively over your campus, right?
Oh, yeah. We're starting to roll out voice over IP. I'm using PoE for cameras. We're actually starting to take a look at using PoE so that we don't have to run quite as much fiber optics on undersea observatories. You know, with that kind of power available to us, we can do some really interesting things. Heck, we even got enough power to run salinity meters at that kind of wattage.
Right. Snowman Sam in the chat room is pointing out that Hack5 had a segment on how to make your router PoE compatible. And actually, hackers have been adding power over Ethernet for the last, 15 years. Even before there was a standard, we realized you could push power over the pins, but it wasn't always safe. I mean, at one point, I remember we had like a 78-volt source at 1 amp, and that's really, really not good for Category 5 cables. But what this new generation of PoE devices is doing, especially with AT and AF, with the 15-watt and the 30-watt version, is making sure that there's a standard that you can buy with either your enterprise-class gear or even your consumer-class gear that will provide clean, safe power to any device that needs it. Cheebert, it used to be that if you wanted PoE, you had to buy an enterprise-class switch, and typically an expensive switch. Now I can go get a unmanaged switch from Netgear that includes 4 PoE ports. Where do you see this technology going in the next 2-3 years?
I don't know. It's really going crazy. I mean, I just bought a mid-span PoE injector for, I think it was $12 on Amazon, and it was a full AF power injector. It was awesome. So with PoE getting that cheap, we're going to start seeing it in some really interesting places. Heck, I think even some of the new single board computers can run on PoE.
And actually, Cheebert, this is sort of a tangent, but I want to bring it up because both of us have experienced this. Web469 wants to know, how many volts can you send over a 26-gauge Cat5 wire? I believe we have, didn't we jump a car using Cat5 cable?
Yeah, we certainly did.
Once.
Normal
Once.
is 48. Yeah. Some of the earlier PoE allowed 48, 24, or 12 volts. It just means the lower voltage, you get higher loss along the distance, and you don't get the longer distances. To get the full 100 meters, you need to be running 48 volts.
Right. Now, Mary Jo and Lou, I know you're not big on the hardware side, but one of the things that this does for software deployment is it allows us to put more and more of our gear in remote places without huge deployment costs. Have you talked at all about using PoE in a deployment of enterprise solutions? Open question to either of you. Not really.
No,
Not really, no.
I never heard of it till today.
No.
So I learned something too.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's what we're all about. Okay, so let's put PoE to bed, and I do promise we're going to get you VLANs in a future episode. It'll be even better. But right now we want to talk about the meat of the episode, and that meat is CRM. Lou, do you want to tell us what CRM is?
Sure. So obviously acronym basically means customer relationship management. And kind of like at the base level, it's they have the buzzwords of basically IDing, acquiring, servicing, and retaining customers. That's kind of the basic marketing terms behind CRM.
Okay. Now, Mary Jo, that does sound like a lot of marketing terminology.
Yeah.
It's a lot of buzzwords, and I actually asked Lou to give me the buzzwords. Do you want to delve a little deeper into the CRM? Because I know you've been watching Microsoft CRM development for a while.
Yeah, I have. And you know what's been really interesting to me in watching it is how Microsoft's evolved what they consider to be CRM and how they're selling it to the customers. You know, when they first came out with their CRM product, it was on premises only. So it was, just typical software. But now the way they're doing CRM at Microsoft is they're developing CRM in the cloud first. So everything they come up with is available in the Dynamics CRM Online product first. Then they bring it back to on-premises. And, a lot of people think they took this approach or went towards this approach because of Salesforce, who's their biggest rival probably in this space. And, Salesforce's whole slogan is no software, even though they really do have software. They like to say end of software, no software. But yeah, it's been really fascinating to watch kind of how Microsoft started out, as just a typical software product. And then this became one of their showcase apps for the cloud. And they've been using the model that they developed for CRM and applying it to some of their other products now. So even something like Windows Server and Windows Azure, cloud first, coming back to on-premises. That's a lot of influence from CRM for them.
Right. Cheebert, I mean, you don't deploy much CRM on a university campus, but I know you've played with Microsoft CRM suites. Who are the other big players? I mean, Mary Jo already mentioned Salesforce. Who are the other big CRM forces to be reckoned with?
Actually, the open source version, Sugar CRM, is used pretty widely. And of course, the, Gold something or another? They're a big CRM, contact management more. But I just threw a URL into the chat room on an InfoWorld identity management story that I did with Paul Venezia and Oliver Riss back, I think, in 2005. And we actually use Sugar CRM as the center. So when someone had to make a change to the corporation, it triggered from the CRM, went into the identity management system, and made changes to all kinds of really interesting things. It was a really, really cool test.
Okay. So that's a general understanding of CRM. But I want to point out a comment from Jabba in the chat room, who said CRM equals complex and expensive. And unfortunately, that's that's the understanding we have of it. CRM has been developing for a while, and some of the very early versions did feel more of a task than anything else. Lou, I want to ask you, let's step back from the enterprise. Let's say I'm a small office, a home office, a small to medium business. What does CRM do for me?
Sure. So, I mean, just like Mary Jo pointed out, a lot of the CRM systems today are moving towards the software as a service, the cloud-based infrastructure. And so kind of the key there is, you're kind of paying for just a service. You don't have to pay for all the infrastructure costs up front. You're just kind of paying per seat, so to speak. So like, for instance, if you were to go towards salesforce.com or even CRM online, those are all just per seat type infrastructure. So you don't pay any upfront costs. You're just, I need 10 users, I pay for 10 users. And so that kind of brings that down to the small business, the common person. I've even seen people use it that have maybe just 5 seats, 4 seats, 3 seats. So that's kind of the key to CRM is to bring it down to the consumer level, as well as all the way up to the enterprise level.
Right. Okay. Now, but drill me down even further.
Yep.
What can I expect to receive? What benefits can I get if I'm running a small to medium business and I install a CRM system? And I'm not saying I'm installing Microsoft's or Salesforce or Oracle, just any CRM system. Mm-hmm. What do I have to put into it, and then what do I get out of it?
Sure. So, I mean, it basically depends. I mean, if you already have data, let's say you have just a spreadsheet of customers today, and that's how you basically keep a Rolodex of information. What do you do? How do you get it into the system? And a lot of the systems today have the capability to basically import that data. So then you kind of get that for free, and then you just basically then begin using the system. So, but if you don't have that data, then it's basically you have to start getting that information into the system, and that's kind of the little upfront cost for that business. But if you can import it, it kind of drops it down. But other than that, after that, the system takes it on, and then you basically utilize the different portions of it, leads and opportunities, and marketing and all that stuff.
Okay, Mary Jo, what does that mean in layman's terms? So I understand it's taking data that I have. So I have customer names, customer contact information. Perhaps I have notes on what product they bought from me and what consumables they might be using. What does the CRM system then do for my sales department or for my customer relations team?
Well, one interesting new trend that you see both from Microsoft and Salesforce, and you're probably going to see from some of the other bigger players too, I think, is before it was like you use CRM to maintain a contact database and to help you as a salesperson kind of trigger your memory. I talked to this person on this date and I gave them this information. They asked me this. But now these companies like Salesforce and Microsoft are adding these activity feeds that look a lot like Facebook's activity feed, basically. And this is kind of a way that they're integrating social feeds right into this contact database. So this opens up a whole number of opportunities. So say you're on a sales team and you're talking to your other people inside your company about a sale that you're all working on, and you can kind of say, hey, I met with so-and-so and they were really interested in this, and put that out there as a feed that, just you inside your company can see. It really helps other people who are in your company say, hey, I talked to so-and-so who's also at this company. Maybe we could get these two people to talk together. So it's almost like you're using an inside the firewall kind of activity feed to talk amongst yourselves in a way that's very much like Facebook, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool new development that's happening in the CRM space.
Right. So what you're talking about is getting people out of their silos, especially when we start talking about the enterprise. It's very easy to focus on just your portion of sales, your portion of the customer. A CRM system could actually break down those walls and say, hey, look, we need to get so-and-so, so-and-so, and him together because they have the same customer and they could be doing a much better job at selling product or providing services. Chee, Lou mentioned one of the barriers to entry, and that is you got to get the data into the system. Can you think of any other barriers to entry for a small to medium business all the way up to an enterprise that wants to finally invest in a CRM system?
Actually, a lot of it's making sure you're consistent. So I'm going to dispel one myth right now. CRM is not new, but in any way, shape, or form. Any of you that have a rewards club is on the customer side of CRM. Hotels have been using CRM for ages and ages. When I check in to, say, a Hilton or a Marriott, 9 times out of 10, if the front desk staff are on the ball and they're knowing what's going on, there's my favorite beverages in the fridge, maybe some of my favorite snacks, and things like that. CRM is all about making sure the customer feels that you're personalized. When I call American Express on the Platinum line, they immediately, they don't even have to ask my name. They basically harvest my cell phone number, and it pops up and says, hey, Mr. Chee, how are we doing? And they'll actually know things like, the birthday of my wife and things like that. And while it sounds very big brotherish, it personalizes the service an awful lot. And that's why people respond to it. CRM's been going through all kinds of things, political campaigns, more than just sales. It's all about reaching out and personalizing what could be a very cold service.
I love this. I love this because you're bringing in another part of CRM. And I think this is why sometimes it's so difficult to nail down a definition of CRM. You've got a company like IBM, which is right now the leader in social outreach. When you talk about an enterprise using social networks, IBM's solution is one of the best. You've got Microsoft, which is specializing in getting actual contacts. So from your databases and turning them into something that becomes leads. What other approaches are there to using social, using the data that's already existing in your network to drive a better customer relation experience, as Chee explained? Open question.
I think it's basically like Mary Jo was pointing out, a lot of social integration. I mean, if you're starting to integrate, there's a lot of add-ins to a lot of these products that allow you to integrate a lot of the social networking aspects, like LinkedIn and other of the social networks, and that brings even more data in. So Chee pointed out, more data in about the customer, and it, like you said, lets all of the different divisions in service and sales and marketing all bring that information to them and gives it more context around the customer and gives them the ability to market it better to them, to help them better, to possibly sell them the right product, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Mary Jo, do you see a lot of that? I mean, we are seeing more integration between traditional CRM, which would be sort of like the Rolodex on steroids, and social networking, which is, as much as I like to make fun of them, Comcast does it really well. Whenever someone complains about Comcast on Twitter, immediately there's someone there saying, can I help you? What's the problem? What's your account? As those two get closer and closer together into a single suite, what kind of CRM approach results?
I think it's definitely an interesting point and question. What you're making me think about right now is Microsoft buying Yammer, which is something they announced at the end of June, and how that may ultimately play into with what Microsoft's doing in CRM and some of their other services. So I think the whole idea of so Yammer does social enterprise networking kind of software. So, you start bringing this in on top of these activity feeds, and you're really saying, what CRM is going to be going forward is just another avenue for a different kind of a social network. And like you're saying, Padre, it's so different from what CRM used to be. I mean, Microsoft internally used to use Siebel CRM. And whenever you talk to somebody who's been at Microsoft for a while and you ask them about using Siebel, you just hear, oh man, that was a nightmare. Like no one wanted to use it. It wasn't a familiar interface. It took too long to learn. People didn't see the benefits they would get out of having to use yet another piece of software. And Microsoft, when they set out to get into the CRM space, the first thing they were all very adamant about was, we want this to look like Outlook. We want this to look like something people get and they don't have to have a lot of retraining on, and that makes sense from a workflow perspective. So now to see this, where they kind of came at it from, it's going to look like Outlook. Now it's going to look like Outlook plus Facebook or Outlook plus Chatter or Outlook plus Yammer, whatever you want to say. But it's just extending it yet again to make it more open and more accessible to more people, I think.
Chee, but that's a fine line, right? Because, yes, we want a functional CRM solution, but we also want to make it accessible by the employees who are actually going to be using it. So if I have a sales force that is just really intimidated by a new interface, it's not going to do me much good. But if I make it look like Outlook, if I make it look like it's just got a couple of modules added on, maybe a little bit of social networking, a little bit of the Yammer content put into it, then it makes it accessible to my workforce and usable for my customer base. Right?
Yeah, funny you should say that. A lot of small corporations actually use Outlook as their CRM. A lot of people don't realize Outlook has an amazing number of extra fields. They have a field, spouse's name, children's name, food allergies. There's all kinds of extra things. And when you buy a full copy of Microsoft Office, one of the things you get or have a download link to is a small business manager, which is basically a CRM. Now, in the past, not so good, but it's been definitely getting better and better and better. And what's nice is they finally got off the stupid Jet engine, which barfs all over itself at 200,000 records. And it's now based on SQL Server Express, which actually can scale, which also means that if you ever move to a cloud-based, you can do a SQL export and not lose all your data. So it's a nice way of having a thread and building your CRM as you grow with it.
Now, that is an interesting point that I want to throw back to you, Lou. Outlook is a CRM. I mean, your contact database is there. You can put many different fields. So when you contact someone, you can have on your screen who they are, what their birthdays are, what their likes and their dislikes are. What do you need to add to turn that into the next generation CRM from Microsoft?
Sure. So it's basically kind of integrating the processes CRM has to that specific data. So for instance, as soon as somebody enters a contact in, it could be, let's say they don't even know that person, but they're just kind of entering their contact information in. And then CRM will help you track that throughout the system. So let's say you call them up and you talk to them and see if you can actually help them with your products, you can sell them products. And so then they possibly become an opportunity from there. So that's kind of like the flow of data. So from then the CRM says, okay, now they're not only they're just a lead, they're now becoming an opportunity. Now all of these other departments will then see this information and they will be assigned to this so-called customer or account. And then they can start following their workflow processes they follow to kind of get in contact with that customer. So it's kind of following those processes, following those workflows. And so even though you're just keeping data in Outlook, sometimes some businesses need more than just that. And that's where CRM kind of comes in.
Okay. So, Lou, I want to put you on the spot here. I want to actually make you give me a case study. What would be a typical workflow? So guide me from the entering of the records that I need in order to have the CRM make the decisions and make the pieces of advice that my sales teams need to completing a sale. What's that process look like?
Sure. So a good example would be like, let's say I'm selling vacuum cleaners, and and basically I don't have a very large customer base. So for instance, I know a lot of people that obviously need vacuum cleaners. So a lot of people say, oh, so-and-so talked to me the other day and they need a vacuum cleaner. So why don't you take their information down? I'll give you who they are and and then you enter that information in. Immediately that sets a flag in the CRM system to say, hey, we got a lead here. They need a vacuum cleaner. They're just, they own a business that might be maybe they need more than one vacuum cleaner. So maybe they're basically a huge corporation that it does cleaning of houses and so on. So maybe they need more than that. So then that's where kind of the flow comes in. And then from there, somebody from the sales team or marketing team will then contact them. And then, talk to them and see what they actually need. Maybe they don't even need a vacuum cleaner. Maybe they already have a supplier of vacuum cleaners. So then they just start entering, more information about them. Who's their current supplier, maybe what the cost of what they currently pay for that type of vacuum cleaner. And then it moves on from there. And so the current flow just keeps moving on and on until they finally figure out, yes, there's an opportunity here to sell that information, to sell the vacuum cleaners to them. So what kind of vacuum cleaners do they need? And then from there, so then they can basically say, okay, we have the specific need that they need, sell that specific brand and how many they need. So then that's kind of how the flow goes through. And so obviously that's just a very small situation. There's a lot of different businesses out there that have different pieces that they need to add in there. But that's why kind of what CRM systems are customizable to allow you to kind of add additional workflows in there.
Okay, well, Mary Jo, I got to ask you, that doesn't sound like anything earth-shattering. I mean, that's basically what we've been doing since people have been selling vacuum cleaners, right? Yeah. You have the discussion, you have a development of a sales strategy, and then you execute it. This seems to be different because now I have a piece of software that's actually prodding me. It's poking me in the right direction and perhaps giving me a few leads I didn't have if I was just keeping it, on a notepad. So why isn't everyone doing this? Why hasn't everyone adopted a CRM system already? There's got to be some barriers to entry. There's got to be some reasons why you have even large enterprises that don't yet have a comprehensive CRM strategy.
Definitely. I think cost is a big one, obviously. Getting people with the expertise to help you implement a CRM system. If you're somebody who's not proficient in being able to deploy an app like that inside your company, it's a cost, and sometimes that's not your first priority unless you're a very sales-oriented organization. It may not be like on your radar screen. You're like, yeah, we'll do CRM someday if we have extra cash or whatever. But right now we can use Outlook and we can use Business Contact Manager or whatever, and that's just fine. So I think that's one of the barriers to entry. Another one might just be having the solution tailored specifically to your organization. And you knew I had to work a beer reference in here, didn't you?
Of course.
I was thinking when you were talking a minute ago about case studies and implementations. One that I wrote about recently was a CRM app that New Belgium Brewing did, and they're the ones who do Fat Tire and a lot of the microbrews out in Colorado, and they had a CRM app in house that they used. It was like kind of haphazard. They used it on some tablets, on some phones, but there wasn't like a really set number of processes and workflows that they had established. So they contracted out with a company called Sonoma Partners, and Sonoma actually built them the first Windows 8 business app. I think it's considered the first Windows 8 business app, commercial app. And what they did was they built an app that they're people who they call the beer rangers, who go out to the bars and they check the beer lines and the stock and all that. They could take a tablet, like a Samsung tablet, those prototype Windows 8 devices, take it out on the road with them, and right on the road, take pictures, input, their beer lines aren't good. They need this product. And see all the things that they could do if they had touch tablets and very established processes around their whole CRM workflow. So I think once you see those kind of apps and you see, oh, wow, it's so specific to my industry, there's a beer CRM, that maybe you start thinking, okay, now I see how something that was very generic is more applicable to the specific industry I'm in.
Right. Okay. Now, Cheever, let me throw this over to you. Barriers to entry, what are the things that you think keep small to medium businesses all the way up to the enterprise from implementing a system that I think everyone knows ultimately will lead in increased sales or increased productivity?
It's always time and cost. I actually don't do a whole lot of CRM. I do CRM personally because I'm a journalist, and being able to know people's likes and dislikes. There's nothing that's going to piss someone off and say no to an interview than to mispronounce their name. So I actually put pronunciations and names into my contact list. calling someone up and saying, how is your wife? You know, that's nowhere near as personal as how's Sandra? You know, things like that really make a difference and get people off on the right foot. So taking the time to input this means someone's got to be very diligent. Someone's got to be, you know, able to type this in. So having it out on a mobile platform so that the field people populate this database will probably go a long way towards CRM being accepted in smaller organizations. And the other thing is you have to maintain it, and this is not free. Even open source CRM is not free because you have an HR cost, you have a maintenance cost of the machines. You have to make the commitment to maintain a CRM, otherwise it starts becoming counterproductive.
All right, so what I'm hearing is a CRM needs to be custom tailored. It needs to be flexible. It needs to be easy to access, and it needs to contain enough information to be usable, which means you also have to be able to affect the working processes of your employees. Let me go around one last time and start off with Mary Jo Foley. What would you say to an SMB, to a medium business, to an enterprise that is looking at implementing a CRM solution?
I'd say, for one thing, I'd say make sure whatever you're looking at is cross-platform. Because this is something that Microsoft's kind of going back and doing some backfill on. But in the fourth quarter of this year, they're going to have their dynamic CRM product available on the iPad, the iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, and Windows Phone. That's going to be huge because how many small and mid-sized businesses are a one-platform shop? Probably not that many. So if you can get a product that is cross-platform, I think you'll be much more likely to implement it across your organization, whatever size it is.
Chee, to you, what are the strategies, what are the hints that you would give to someone who's looking at implementing a CRM?
Write it down first. Make sure everybody in the corporation agrees on the terms. There's nothing weirder than having a things like birth date or DOB or people creating all these weird fields. Stick to the right field name so that your data is consistent. That's probably going to be making it a lot more useful if it's consistent.
So cross-platform, consistent. Last word to you, Lou. Sure. What do they need to know?
So CRM systems are not one size fits all. So, I mean, really find a system that really allows you to add additional functionality to it. Maybe it's integration of data from other systems. Maybe it's additional functionality around your CRM system itself, maybe an add-in of some type, or even bringing in social data. So, I mean, I find it's not one size fits all. So in order to ensure that, make sure that the system's able to kind of bring additional information in.
All right. Well, you've done it again. You've used up another hour watching This Week in Enterprise Tech. That's all the time we have for this episode. But before we go, I want to give our guest a chance to, talk about whatever it is that they're working on. Mary Jo Foley, you're always talking about Microsoft. You're always following Microsoft. You're always giving us the information we need. But is there something special that you really want people to pay attention to?
Right now I'm writing a lot about the Windows products that are going to be launching in the next couple weeks. So on September 4th, Microsoft's going to be launching Windows Server 2012. And on September 12th, Visual Studio 2012. So I'd say stay tuned on the All About Microsoft blog for lots of dev coverage and Windows Server coverage coming up.
On to you, Chee. I know that you've got a new hat, so you want to tell us about it?
Well, my goal, basically, I'm marketing and sales. I'm actually building help desk systems. It's kind of fun with playing in a startup and working with thin clients again. The big difference is, having the graphics capability so that the user experience is so much like a regular desktop. It's keep tuned. Thin clients are going to come back. The whole concept, it actually feels like a mainframe, but more. And I'm looking forward to it.
Now, Chee, I know you too well. That whole thing sounded like an NDA. You're sitting on something big and you just can't talk about it. But that's okay. I won't push you, but I do want to hear about it after the show. On to you, Lou. What's going on at Microsoft? What can you talk about that won't get you in trouble with HR? What do you want us to know about?
Well, there's always improvements in CRM. We're constantly making improvements cross-platform, so on and so forth, web. But for me, I've been really interested in just working with Windows 8. I mean, even outside of work, where I'm working in, building small little applications from WinRT, and it's been a really cool experience. So that's kind of some of the thing I'm doing outside of work, basically.
All right. Thanks to all of our panelists. I do want to remind everyone here that if you're listening to this on a download, if you've had it set to automatically download to your Android phone or your Windows phone, that we actually do tape live every Monday at noon Pacific time. It's great to catch us live because it also means you can drop into the chat room. And if you drop into the chat room, not only will you be able to ask me questions on the air, but you'll be able to talk to all the wonderful people that will share chat realm with the TWiT Army. Also, please, 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 please tell your friends about TWiT. If they work in the enterprise, if they're execs, if they're IT pros, if you think they'll like our segments that define basic networking technology or review products that IT pros would use on the road, then you got to tell them about TWiT. Spread the good word and subscribe. Go to our show page at twit.tv/TWiT, and you'll be able to find all the links to subscribe to your iTunes feed, your Zune feed, your RSS feed. The more people that download, the more people that subscribe, the more enterprise goodness we can bring you. Also, please subscribe to my Twitter feed at PadreSJ. If you do, you'll be able to send me notes about, what you liked, what you didn't like, and what you want to hear about on future TWiTs. It's a great way to keep in touch and to just stay engaged with me, and I can stay engaged with you. Finally, did you know that TWiT isn't the only show on this network? In fact, TWiT has a whole stable of shows that we put on each and every single day. And if you were not watching, this is what you missed.
This is TWiT, Mac Break Weekly. If you're flying, I'm buying.
It worked. I'm going to Legoland, everybody. Point number 1, talk about how you never take a vacation. Point number 2, talk about dance, marionette, dance.
Masterfully executed.
Sorry. He punched me. Out loud.
The Social Hour.
For a Rat or Fad this week, wanted to talk about the Bike Charge Dynamo. Now, what this is this little contraption, and it goes onto your bike wheel. The idea being that you can charge your smartphone, your iPhone, for example, basically by biking.
TWiT Live specials.
They're staying on the mat. This is important. Oh, with the head turn. And I'm not sure that Lisa gets the point because Leo stayed inside the ring. Although that's an impressive tackle.
Know-how.
I want to watch TWiT on my work computer, but I don't have admin access. So how do I actually do that? How do I take Chrome or something like that and bring it over to my computer and be able to use it and watch TWiT?
If you missed this week on TWiT, you missed a lot.
So stay tabbed. Come back next week because we're going to be talking about storage. Oh, and I blow up a hard drive. I'm Father Robert. And remember, if you want to know what's happening in the enterprise, just keep TWiT.